What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Morello Show, number 3. I'm your host, Kyle Morello. With me today, my Mets Twitter friend, Chris the StealyMann. Chris, how we doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here, and I'm even more happy. Not that I like you being here, but opening day is 2 days away.
That's insane.
I know
I feel like this has been the longest off season of my entire life.
it's been a lot. Well, we've had an exciting offseason as Mets fans. I mean, there's been a lot that
It's
we've.
been a roller coaster of emotions.
It has. And I mean, the stuff that's happened this offseason that will hopefully play out in the field because we actually have a good squad this year that we're looking forward to.
Yeah, I think I was during spring training. I think I was more surprised by the depth pieces that we picked up for the field than I was with all the depth we got for pitching. I was really surprised with Kevin Pillar and Albert Amora doing pretty well, and seemed to cover ground in center field really well.
Yeah, he really did. Honestly, I think he's improved a lot as a center field defense, which is something that Mets fans and media people, fans all over baseball have been like, hey, like his defense isn't great. Like maybe you guys need a center fielder. That's why we try to get Springer. But he's actually shown like he can play some defense center field, which would be really, really important for us. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, let's get more into those depth pieces because there's one that I really, really like, and I think he should be starting, but I don't know where he would be, and that's Luis Guillorme. He's had
Oh
a
my goodness.
fantastic spring training. Do you like see him being in the lineup like regularly at
I
all? What do you think?
I think I've gotten into maybe 7 or 8 quarrels with people on Met. I've recently found Mets Facebook, and it's
Oh,
infinitely worse than I could have ever imagined. It's such a bad place to be. Um,
I've never
it's
even
just
heard of Mets Facebook.
it's so bad. It's just a bunch of awful Facebook groups that I was trying to hate read. And as long as you have to chime in at some point where it's just like absolutely ridiculous, where people, it's really just the worst type of Mets fans that I must be just so. I mean, I've only been alive for 23 years, so I think that these guys have watched 1986 and have been mourning that and like not been able to celebrate. It's a terrible, terrible place.
Oh man.
I've been advocating for McNeil at third base, and Guillorme and Lindor up the middle. I think that's just such a solid. I don't think you'll find a better defensive in the NL East or even in the NL. I can't think of a better up the middle defensive lineup. But Jeff struggled a little bit at the beginning of spring training, but at the beginning of spring training, I'd be ecstatic if they gave Guillorme the starting spot at third base over JD. Um, Especially on days when Stroman's pitching or Peterson's pitching, you need somebody on that left side to be able to make plays. But I think I've seen a lot of improvement from JD as well. People were kind of excited that he made a routine play
I
to
did
his
see that, yeah. Now that ball was hit really hard off the bat. I will give him that.
uh,
But at the same time, like Yormi's making that play 10 times out of 10.
yeah, and probably easier. But I like JD. I think JD's a really great. I loved his. I think he did a one presser where he was just talking about all the rumors have been getting traded and his perspective on being in those trades. He says when you're in the discussion for Matt Chapman, that's really a humbling experience where people are talking about you being a good trade for one of the best third basemen in baseball. So I really love that perspective. It just adds to the good vibes per game we're getting out of this
We are getting
organization.
the good vibes per game that we're going to get this season is going to be through the roof.
I can't. That's really what almost my biggest disdain for Trevor Bauer was that I think it would bring the vibes down throughout the fan base and throughout the organization. Whatever people's like personal opinions about him. I think he's the one-eyed closed pitching thing is a distraction. All these awful like, and then like fighting with people on Twitter. It's exhausting.
It
It's
is.
just
Where were
it's
you
like
like in that whole like when we were like that day that he signed with the Dodgers, but like it was rumored it was going to be between the Mets and Dodgers, and like the merch came out on his website and it was like let's go Mets and stuff like that. Like where were you as like a fan mindset? Like do I want him? Do I not want him? Like where were you on that?
I think I was really, really angry that we were willing to spend 45 million a year on Trevor Bauer, but we're nickel and diming George Springer or, like worrying about that. Um, I think I was also frustrated I think a lot of the frustrations would have been like calmer if Taiwan Walker was signed earlier than he was. I
Yes.
remember missing on Paxton, missing on Corey Kluber. I can't think of the gentleman that came from Korea or Japan that went to the
I
Giants.
can't remember his name, but yes, I know who you're talking about.
It was just missing out on so many of these pitchers that I really wanted. And then Taiwan Walker, I think, is a great pickup. And I would have been a lot calmer throughout the offseason if that was done sooner. But I mean, with Bauer, all that nonsense, I was like, if Trevor Bauer was a more likable guy, this would have been the best troll job on the planet. But I was more
Yes.
worried that like, oh goodness, we just overpaid for a guy that pitched well against the NL Central. Like he
And the AL
wanted
Central, who besides the Twins, like, and the Indians were okay, but like besides the Twins, like it wasn't good offensively.
just really, really is struggling. Like a season that any like a DeGrom would throw a sub one. Like it was exhausting. I remember just being like, I can't believe Sandy Alderson would get in a off season where you had a GM fired for sexually harassing a reporter, a hitting coach fired for sexually harassing another employee in the Mets organization, and Mickey Callaway also being the probably one of the worst cases of it all,
Yes.
because the Mets kind of allowed that to happen. They festered that, and they in a off season where all of these things happen, and you're going to sign somebody that it has a reputation, whether you believe it or not, has a reputation for being misogynistic.
Correct.
Like you're going to do that to that clubhouse. I mean, it's just, I remember just being absolutely floored that they got Bauer.
Yeah, I mean, like the other thing is you're gonna pay somebody $40 million a year who has a career ERA of like 3.72, I want to say. It's something like
I think it's like 3.91. I
it's
think it's
close to
high,
4.
higher.
It's
Yeah,
close to
closer to
4.
4.
Like, yes, he won the Cy Young last year. I think it's a Mickey Mouse Cy Young. I mean, he only played against the AL and NL Central. Until the playoffs, he did pitch very well against the Braves, but the Braves hadn't seen him all year. So there's that. And like, I don't think his track record's that good. Now, I think he's better than his track record has shown, because I think you only get better as time. I mean, Jacob deGrom's an example of that. He's 32 years old now and he's pitching the best he ever has. But you don't pay $40 million to a guy who is that close to an ERA of 4 for his career. And he's always had the talent. He was a first round pick, but he also like worked his way out of Cleveland. He had that temper tantrum when he got taken out the day before he got traded. He was in Arizona and they didn't really like him there. I don't think. Like he's had reputations, like you said, of not being like
I
this
think that's
great
where he got
guy.
injured.
Yes, he did get injured too,
Yeah, he got hurt that year. He's
but
just a headache. And if you don't re-sign Marcus Stroman and Noah Syndergaard after this off season, and we're going to see them walk for less than 45 mil a year combined, probably. I wouldn't be surprised if one gets 20 AAV and one gets like 15.
yeah,
I think Noah's probably maybe a little higher, but still.
it really depends on his injury.
Yeah, I think if Noah comes back, he easily gets Wheeler money. And I think the biggest mistake they're making is not extending Stroman early, if that's even a discussion they're willing to have.
I agree.
I think he's my sleeper for the Cy Young this year.
I think a lot of people are on that opinion too, and I'm one of them. I mean, he's had an incredible offseason. He rested the entire 2020. Like he's been pitching well. I mean, he hasn't been pitching like exceptional in spring training, but he's been pitching well. He's been showing some new pitches, and it's spring training, so it's like as it like it matters, but like, it's not like life or death for someone on Stroman's level. So it'll be exciting to see him pitch. But like if we don't re-sign any of them, but we are considering signing Bauer, that's a red flag for Alderson and company.
Yeah, I think these guys want to be. I mean, the only thing that makes me, I'm on for the Conforto extension. I'm kind of on like I think there's like a 15% chance it gets done before opening day, very low. But I think he just wants to be here. I have to imagine. I mean, before Steve Cohen, there was never talks of players having meetings with the Mets.
No.
Like, I mean, Jason Day was such a huge signing, and granted, that was a guy that was going to put up numbers. I mean, he put up numbers in Boston, but like there was after 2006, I can't think of like a year where there was like the top 5 free agents are going to meet with the Mets first. And I think
except for Cespedes, that's about it.
Cespedes, and that was after they traded for him.
Yeah,
they did a World Series run.
Exactly.
So I think like with Conforto, when you're going to be the top, he's the top outfielder free agent by a mile. There's nothing even close to him next year. I think the closest to him is Charlie Blackmon, and Blackmon will only be a free agent if he opts out, and there's no chance he's going to opt out. I think he's getting paid like 20 million or something like that.
No, it's gonna be. They need to. Personally, I was on the bandwagon of them extending Conforto before Lindor. Like I understand Lindor's a better player. Conforto, especially last year, showed just how good he can be. I know it was a short season, but he showed just how good he can be, how well he can hit. And he's been with the club the entire time. He went through the ups of the 2015 and 2016 playoffs, and he went through the downs of the last few years. I mean, I know we had a good year in 19, but we missed the playoffs. But like he's been there. I think that's a guy who's vital. He's also younger. We should extend him. I don't know where talks are right now. I don't think they're very far at all. I know Lindor's probably the furthest along of the four big guys we have that are going to be free agents in the offseason. But that's a guy who needs to get re-signed right now, ASAP.
Yeah, I'm on the side of Conforto is all the more valuable re-signing than Lindor, and I think you absolutely should get both done. But if you look at we have no outfield depth, we have no prospects other than Pete Crow Armstrong. Though, hopefully he pans out. Like we all talk about.
He's 19.
They're gonna, yeah, he's 19. He is very small right now, as a 19-year-old would be. And I mean, like Lindor, I want more than anything in the world other than Conforto, but there's Baez, there's Seager, there's a lot of free agents next year that you could go after. And I don't think it's a net loss if you give up Andres Gimenez and Ahmed Rosario and two prospects for a year of Lindor. That's the best shortstop in baseball, and you have an opportunity to make a World Series run because of him.
Exactly.
And I don't think Met fans are used to it, where it's like you make moves that don't make sense sometimes just because they might win you a World Series. The same with people complaining about Chris Bryant. If you can get Chris Bryant for peanuts and not re-sign him, that's a great deal. You give up a prospect for Chris Bryant, then you give him a qualifying offer the next offseason and see if it pans out. If it doesn't, you get a second round pick and you replace that prospect you gave up. I just don't think Met fans are used to ownership and management making decisions to win now as well as to win later on. Like
no, they're not
it's
at
a
all.
really exhausting debate of hearing people be like, well, the offseason's failure if you don't get Lindor. It's definitely a down feeling to not get Lindor, but also there are replacements for him next year, and the shortstop depth has Ronnie Mauricio, who I think is going to come up a lot sooner than we expect.
Yes, I was just going to mention Mauricio looked phenomenal in spring. He looks like he's also grown a lot too, like in the weight room and all that, and he's still young. Like he should be here by next year. If we re-sign Lindor, great. Maybe Mauricio can play another position. Maybe stays in the minors another year. Maybe we use him as a trade chip to get someone else. I hope not, because I don't like trading all of our prospects like we did with Brody Van Wagenen, which is why we don't have Klenic, who's a top 10 prospect now. But like you said, there's so many options next year in the offseason too. Plus, we have the organizational depth to figure that out. So if we don't re-sign Lindor, like obviously it would be nice, but we have some options. Plus, I remember with Cespedes, we had like that 5-day window after the World Series, like we could sign him whenever before anyone else, I think it was. And we didn't, but we still ended up getting him the offseason. So even if we don't sign him to a contract extension now, yes, you want to test the market, but there's still a chance we could sign him, especially if we have a good year. If he has a good year, if the Mets go far, there's a lot of options for us.
I don't see any reason to be. I mean, it's the first year of a new ownership. I think people are a little bit too antsy.
No, I agree. Especially with like all the talk of, oh, Steve Cohen has unlimited money. Like, he can spend whatever he wants, can get everybody who wants it. Then, we didn't get Real Muto, though we signed McCann first, so it's fine. We didn't get Springer. We didn't get Bauer. So I understand that like some Mets fans on like Twitter and Facebook and all that are probably a little bit upset about that. And I was a little bit upset about that. Not so much Bauer, but more Springer because we needed center field. But it's also not the end of the world because we had a good team. We just didn't play well last year. Short season. I think
Springer
we're okay.
only makes sense to me. Not getting Springer only makes sense to me if they were 100% positive getting Conforto back.
Correct.
If they don't get Conforto back, I'll be pretty mad.
I'll be upset.
We didn't get the best outfield person for the next 2 years because he wanted one extra year than we were willing to give him on a pretty friendly deal. It wasn't that expensive comparatively to what you could have given him. So unless they don't re-sign Conforto, I'll be pretty angry. But I mean, losing Springer was just frustrating. But when Sandy said it was because it was the years they couldn't agree on, I was like, all right, well, you better get Conforto now because there's no outfielders to go get.
I'm pretty sure they also cited re-signing Conforto as a reason to not
Yeah,
getting Springer,
they specifically said it would make it much more difficult to re-sign Michael if they got George Springer.
which like great. I understand that. Like I know people joke about him having unlimited money, Steve Cohen, but like there's a way to spend it. Like you don't have to go crazy. So
Mhm.
wanting to re-sign Conforto, perfectly fine. I prefer that actually. I would rather have a long-term extension with Conforto than 5 years in his 30s with George Springer. 100% would. The problem is if they don't penny up and pay Conforto, like you said, that makes the Springer loss that much worse. But
Mhm.
we did make some good depth moves, like we were mentioning earlier in the off season. Like we signed Kevin Pillar, like you mentioned. Yamamoto is going to be good, even though he's starting the year in AAA. Luke Casey is vying for the fifth option. How do you see those like depth pieces making their way, making themselves notable during the year? I should say.
I think it rocks because you're not going to see um, ridiculous option moves with like forcing Drew Smith and Franklin Kilome and Corey Oswald. Like everyone's criticizing them, but I don't think anyone realizes, or they definitely realize that they're just not patient enough to see how difficult it is to see somebody go from AAA to AA to MLB to AAA to AA to MLB in a year.
It's a lot
I
of
think it's
travel.
awesome to see you have such depth with Yamamoto and with Casey. That's already, it came in clutch because with Carlos Carrasco ended up getting hurt. I also don't fault him for that. People are kind of being rude about that. Like
Yeah.
injuries happen.
Where the Mets injuries
But
happen all the time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
understand that. But yeah, what were you saying?
yeah, I just think getting depth pieces, it's not the sexiest of deals during an off season, but I was getting very excited about it. The only one that I was kind of iffy about was Matz. I didn't really want to give up on Matz yet. And I think he would have been very useful this year. But I still, you have to replenish your farm system somehow. And they turned it into Khalil Lee. And it's
I love
awesome
that
to just
deal.
see the Mets involved in 3-team trades. Like that didn't happen in a previous ownership. 2 3-team trades that ended up getting Khalil Lee and Joey Lucchesi, and then 2 other prospects from Toronto. So I mean that's just a refreshing thing to see. You're seeing actual management and actual scouting, and it's just something that no one's used to as Met fans. It's a completely different organization from top to bottom.
And I love it. I mean, that's like you said, it's something we're not used to. We've never seen, at least in our lifetimes, like we have
Mm-hmm.
never seen that. When we obviously we were good in '06, we had a little run of 15, but like that was more of like drafting and developing. That wasn't necessarily, oh, we're gonna do things smartly. We're gonna make these 3-team trades. We're gonna sign depth. Like it's a lot better of a situation now. I'm so thankful. And Sandy Alderson can now actually use resources to make the best teams. Like when he was in Oakland, like he actually had resources, like in like
Mm-hmm.
like the late '80s and stuff. Like he had resources to make the good teams. That's how they were so good back then. Like when he was with the team the first time, yes, we were in New York. We probably had more than a lot of teams in terms of like capital to spend, but it wasn't the same. And I think he showed frustration in that. And I think he said that even after he's taken over this new role. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out. Because like you said, like those depth signings were not sexy at all. Like Yamamoto's not sexy. He only played a couple years in Marlins and he showed some stuff, but he hasn't like pitched that well. You talk about Luke Casey, who showed a little bit with San Diego, but again, not great. Like talk about guys like Miguel Castro, even though it was previous administration, like we kept him around for this year. Like we didn't let him go. And that's someone who's had a really good spring. Talk about Pilar and VR and Jose Martinez, who's going to come off huge off the bench for us. Like all these people you wouldn't dream about a year ago. And here we are. It's
Yeah, I
great.
mean, getting Martinez was like the craziest deal of only $1 million, and they had a minor league option for him as well, which was crazy to me. Yeah, I mean, it's just a complete like it can't be stressed enough that people aren't used to seeing, competent leadership, and we really Sandy hasn't had a great offseason from the public eye of just I didn't really like his pressers for any of the problems with Mickey,
No.
not problems, but just actual abhorrent behavior with Mickey. I still don't trust that he didn't know what was going on. I mean, I've been on Twitter talking about how the article references Mickey Callaway's gross behavior as the worst kept secret in baseball. And people are like, oh, Sandy didn't know. So either
He
Sandy
knew.
is like, either Sandy, you want to believe Sandy's blind and deaf to everything that's going on in his clubhouse and has no clue what's going on in his clubhouse, or you want to believe he knew what was going on and just turned a blind eye to it. And I understand they're like, oh, he was steamrolled by the Wilpons to hire Mickey. Like they did it so quickly without. Well, but I don't want to work for that organization.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what the straw that broke the camel's back. They made him leave and having cancer, unfortunately. But either you want to believe your GM at the time knew nothing about what was going on in the clubhouse, or you want to believe that he turned a blind eye to it all. And I don't think he. And I mean, I called out a lot of reporters, and they seem to be more they've reconciled with the fact that they made a mistake. But Sandy completely saying we knew nothing at his organization was just kind of gross, and I don't really trust him right now to hire the correct people. Maybe the best people for the organization I just don't trust. But he's also not going to be as important next year when Zach Scott takes over as complete GM and after a year under his belt of being GM, and hopefully Steve Cohen figures it all out, because I mean, getting former Governor Christie onto a board, trustees or whatever they are, the executive board was weird.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
Well, Cohen donated like $1 million, more than $1 million to former Governor Christie's presidential campaign, which to me is like, okay, you're going to give millions of dollars to Chris Christie to run for president. You can sign Michael DeForto. That was the biggest waste of money I've ever. There was no chance that guy was going to win. He was also like an abhorrent governor, like left with like the lowest like approval rating, and you're going to give him like $7 million to run for president. Like, it's time, Steve, to give up. I think he probably hired Chris Christie as payback. Like, hey, I gave you all that money. You're going to do some work for me now.
Yeah, potentially.
But and then I think that board of trustees Chris Christie's on has Bill Maher and former press secretary for 14 days, Anthony Scaramucci. So it's a very odd board to have.
That is a weird board of trustees. Damn. Yeah, no, I mean, and the other thing too that I was going to point out was the Jared Porter situation. Like, how did they also not know about that going in? I know that was probably more of a kept secret than Mickey Callaway stuff. I don't think that's an excuse though. Like, you gotta vet out someone you're hiring for such an important position. Like, it's not like it's, even if it was just a regular staffer, like you still have to vet him out. But for the GM of your ball club, the face of the people making moves for your baseball operations, and all these allegations come out about 62 texts in a row that were unsolicited to that female reporter. She quit baseball because of him. Like, how do you not see that out? You know what I mean? Like, how do you not?
I think Sam Leibowitz was putting it the best from Pleasant Good Evening and on Twitter. Great follow.
Great follow.
My ego. Love Sam. He's one of the kindest on Twitter. But like, I think it's insane to me when it was Hannah Kaiser. Is that the writer that asked? Yeah, Hannah Kaiser, I believe, during that Porter presser asked, did you vet any one woman when talking to Jared,
and he said no.
Interviewing? And he said no, there was nobody to ask. And to me, that was absolute. Jaw dropped. There's not one woman that's worked for Jared Porter in his entire life.
He worked with the Cubs. He worked with the Diamondbacks. He worked with the Red Sox.
All have female executives.
Yeah,
like all have female executives. And also, there's not one person that worked under him. There's not one employee that reported to him that was a woman. You didn't ask one subordinate how he was as a boss. Like, what in the world are you doing? Like, how is that not a part of your vetting process? The way that person works with women is an extremely important question to ask when vetting someone. And I think it was just I can't believe how bad of a vetting process that is. And it just proves that it's a boys' club, and that's all they care about. And that's what really sucks.
It does really suck. And that was part of my conversation last week with Brooklyn Vaughn. Like, we were trying to talk about how we can like improve the situations like this with men versus women. Like, it's not versus, but like men treating women better in the sports industry. Like, this was part of our points too, like the Mickey Callaway situation, the Jared Porter situation. Like, it's gross. It's gross that these things happen. And as a Mets fan, and people try to, let's say on Twitter when this happened, like, oh, LOL Mets, like, they always do with everything. I'm sure you're well aware.
Yeah, little Mets.
LOL Mets, but like, this isn't an LOL Mets. This is a much, much bigger problem. That's an industry-wide problem, not a Mets problem.
Part of me just now is thinking like maybe Theo Epstein took a break from baseball this year, partially because he knew the Porter stuff was going to come out. And I mean, he was Porter's boss for two organizations.
Yeah.
Like he was in charge of Porter in Boston. He was in charge of Porter in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just like that's another like how can Theo Epstein ever be? He's just as guilty as because the Cubs were reported to like they knew what was going on, and
Yeah.
didn't stop him from getting hired anywhere else. And it's a bit, I think the one thing you can do is employ women at higher positions and ensure that the power dynamic. I mean, the problem with all jobs in general is there's a power dynamic and it's unhealthy.
Correct.
In any office, in any organization you're working in, if the person above you has the power to fire you, that's unhealthy. And I think it's a complete shift that organizations need to get away from, that your boss can't have any leverage over you. Your boss is a manager. They're not somebody that should be able to punish you. They shouldn't be able to reward you. That should be a separate entity in any organization you're in. And there's no reason I or any employee should ever feel nervous about going to the boss or going to a separate person about, hey, my boss is being extremely inappropriate and I need to do something without being worried about losing my job. And that just isn't a faction. In any place I've worked, the power dynamic is made known that like, hey, I'm your boss. I can fire you. I sign your paychecks.
And
It's
it's
a really
gross.
gross behavior.
It's
It's really
disgusting.
gross.
Yeah, like you said, like there should be a separate outlet. And I think more companies might be starting to do that. Like, or there's a separate outlet you can report things like that to, because you shouldn't want to have to fear for your job, like you said, if you report things that happen to you. It's not like you did something wrong and then you have to go admit to it. In the case of like women in the industry, like you should be able to, it's like, hey, this happened. I'm very uncomfortable about it. Help me, please. Like it's disgusting that that's not a thing already.
It's terrible. I think you don't get there. I mean, hiring women is important, but I think power dynamics are always there. And the power dynamic just it influences the way you work. If you're scared that you're going to lose your job because you asked for one day off, like I shouldn't have to go to my manager. And maybe this is all very rudimentary, and like maybe I haven't had enough experience in the workplace, people could say, but I don't think it could be argued that there shouldn't be a quid pro quo between if I work harder, you're going to give me a day off. Like I think it's that's one aspect of it. Just the exploitation of labor inside an organization is what throws me. I don't think anyone should fear that they're whether they suck up to bosses is going to be good or not, or if they report their bosses is going to be good or not. It's just I
Exactly.
think that's how you fix all organizations, is getting rid of power dynamics as much as you can.
Because those get exploited, unfortunately, by the people in power.
Mm.
And it's like we've been saying this whole last few minutes, it's disgusting, it's gross, and it needs to stop ASAP. So if you're a team owner listening to this, I doubt it, but if you're a team
Yeah,
owner listening to this, change the way you do things. Trust me, because it will
if
make
you
for
own
a
a team,
safer
if you own
environment.
a team or a huge hedge fund, definitely listen to this.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. And a huge charity organization ran by your wife. If there's anybody that fits those specific guidelines, please contact and let us run your
Yes,
organization's HR.
we would do a
Department.
phenomenal job.
Oh yeah, man. Pizza Fridays, chocolate milk in the fountains.
Yes,
Um,
chocolate milk's so underrated.
anything that was promised to you in fifth grade when running for fifth grade class
We got
president,
it.
we ensure that will be
Taco
recess
Tuesdays
all day, Taco Tuesday,
have to,
no homework. There will be no homework allowed.
but you better be showing up to the field early to get your stuff in, to get your
Yeah,
works in, your reps in. Cannot speak
get
today.
your reps in early. There will be nothing like that. But yeah, I think that's really. I mean, I'm still formulating an opinion on a lot of these things, but I think the best way to do anything is to destroy power dynamics and to ensure that people feel safe while they're at work in every aspect of it. And a boss should be less of a punisher and more of just a manager and
I agree.
motivator.
I agree. There shouldn't the power dynamics are I don't want to say the main reason because men being gross by nature, not saying all men, of course, but men by nature are gross. That is a reason. But the power dynamics definitely wouldn't. If they weren't there, it would be a big help. So
Oh
that
my
needs to
goodness,
happen.
yeah. I think about everywhere I've been lucky. Anywhere I've worked, my manager has been more of like a just a person to bounce ideas off of, and really great relationships with them. But I've also had managers that were rude to women, like specifically where it's like they're in their 60s and they think they can talk the way that they want to talk. And I promise that that will continue no matter what generation that is. It's not a generational thing. I think
Unfortunately.
it's a part of a power structure where people think that because I'm in charge of you, I can talk the way I want to you. And in most cases, it's a boys' club, and unfortunately, um, the boys don't speak up about it. So that's really where it comes from. Allowing your morality to be in charge and not your fear. Again, that's where if you get rid of the idea, I think there's a lot of reporters that knew about the Mickey Callaway stuff that didn't do anything about it because they
Had to
were
have.
afraid that
Had to
what
have.
happens when you get rid of X reporter? Like, okay, he reports that Mickey Callaway is doing these things, gets fired, then they just hire somebody that's not going to talk about it. So it's like no matter what, I see the catch 22 within that. But that's where if you have a reporter that is able to go to a separate outlet, and not get caught and not get held responsible for doing the right thing, then that's you don't have that situation. The problem is that there's a lot of people on the New York Mets beat that are employed by the New York Mets, and they're not allowed to say, or they lose their job and you just replace them with a worse person. It's like
Exactly.
the catch 22 is just never ending. So I think there is a light that people need to be more like the contingent, the idea that there's a contingency between whether I can or should report. You should always do it, but whether you can is the important question.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm thankful that I've never had bosses like that at all. If I did, I would probably be uncomfortable, but I've never had that. So I'm very, very thankful. But yeah, like we were saying, the workplace dynamics with the kind of stuff in Major League Baseball, especially, it definitely needs to change. Last thing before we go, record prediction for the Mets this year. What are we thinking?
I think the cop out is like 94. I think I've seen a
Okay.
lot of people say 92 to 94. Um, I don't know. I think I either want to go low or go really high. Um, I think the division is going to be a lot weaker than any. The Phillies have no pitching.
I actually think the division is going to be the strongest in baseball,
You
believe it or
think?
not.
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to end up being Atlanta's defense is going to crumble and be awful. I
I
think the
hope
Phillies
so.
have no pitching. I think the Marlins are going to go back to being the Marlins despite having some fire last year. I mean, a 60-game stretch is easy to fall down really quickly and really
Yeah.
easy to stay up really quickly. So I think the 162 is going to be interesting. I'm going to say I'm going to go 99. I'm going to go high. I'm going to say
Damn, really?
99 wins. Yeah,
Okay.
I think Met fans are going to go down to September and be like, oh, we could be a 100-win organization our first year. And then it just falls off at 99 because not everything can be perfect.
That's the
But
Mets. Yeah.
that's a super optimistic. No one gets hurt. Nimmo bats crazy. Conforto bats crazy. I think Lindor is also an MVP candidate this year for me.
I agree.
I'd call. I think Lindor has an MVP year.
I agree. I do think he's a candidate. Personally, I think 92 and 70 is what we'll end up. I think we'll finish second division behind the Braves. They'll probably win 95, 96. I think it'll be close. But as we're going back to the division stuff, like, yeah, the Phillies pitching isn't great, though I do think their bullpen has improved a lot. I think the Alvarado acquisition was phenomenal for them. Same with Archie Bradley. I really like that signing for them too. I think their hitting is still going to be pretty good. They still have Harper, they still have Romuto, McCutcheon, even though he's getting a little older. Hopefully, well, not hopefully because I'm not a Phillies fan. I despise the Phillies, but hopefully for them, Hoskins has a bounce back year hitting. Like they have a squad. The Braves, I think, are the best team top to bottom in the division. I think their pitching is phenomenal with Soroka coming back, especially. Um, and they're hitting. Obviously, we know about that. Their defense, like you said, could be a little bit because Austin Riley's not a great defender. Ozuna's not a great
Marcelo
defender.
Zune is awful. Yeah.
Um, but they do have some good defensive pieces too. Like Freddie Freeman's obviously pretty good. Swanson, Acuna, like they've got some pieces there. The Marlins, I do like their young team. I do think they. This is the most. If I was a Marlins fan, this is the most optimistic I would probably have ever been, at least since like the early Stanton, like Jose Fernandez,
Yeah, when
Yelich,
they got that one
Ozuna
off
days.
season where they got Reyes, Burrell.
Yep.
Yeah,
Either then or when like those four that I just mentioned came up, like with D Gordon and Justin Bour, like right around
yeah, D. Gordon.
2015, 16, something like that. Um, Most optimistic I would be since then because I think Sixto Sanchez is the next coming of Pedro Martinez. I
Yeah,
really do.
he's eligible for Rookie of the Year, and I think he was my Rookie of the Year pick.
I haven't made mine yet. First of all, I'm gonna get on that. Opening day is 2 days away, but that might be one of mine too. I think Al Cabone's still technically a rookie. I think he could do that for the Phillies. Maybe Nolan Gorman. I don't know if he's gonna play at all this year, but I mean, I think he will. I just don't know in what capacity because Arenado. But
Yeah,
they're, I think they can be a pretty decent team. And then the Nationals too. They still have my MVP pick, Juan Soto. They still have a talented team. Their pitching's great. They still have, Scherzer, Strasburg, Corbin. So it's gonna be a battle in the division, and I'm looking forward to it because our division hasn't always been great. The Mets have been part of that too, but I think all five teams could win at least 75 games, which is
yeah.
pretty solid.
I think it'll be a good division. I just think that one or two teams is gonna fall off completely very quickly because there's just so many holes in a lot of their lineups and with their
Yeah.
pitching staffs. I think the Mets, if Guillorme plays every day, I think they're the best team in the NL East. Most complete team right next to the Braves.
If he
But
can just
I
hit, he'll
think
be in the lineup. That's it.
I hope. I want him to play every day. I think he's the best. He at least 5 days a week. I want him playing, and I like JD Davis a lot, but especially when you have such ground ball pitchers and you need a guy that can make every play, not just the routine one.
Especially Stroman. Stroman's been trying to tailor his game a lot more to being a ground ball pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And Guillorme would be perfect for that. I'm not saying Davis, I think his defense has improved this spring. I think he's been working with Lindor and the whole staff and all that. But I kind of have to agree with you that Guillorme should be the play. Like if he can bat eighth, and I think he'll be fine. Like he showed his promise with his bat last year a lot, and still got relegated to the bench when we traded for Todd Frazier again. That will still haunt me.
That's like the antithesis of Will Pond moves, where it's like when they were letting Dom Smith play right field and Jay Bruce play, they were taking reps away from Conforto. They were putting Dom in crazy places. They had Jay Bruce playing first. It was just that was that, and then Todd Frazier coming back. I am so worried that Todd Frazier opted out of Pittsburgh. I do not want him to end up coming here.
Absolutely not. We have
There's
no
no
need. We
place
have no
for
need
him.
for him.
Just send all of his bats to Pete to use, and then just leave. You go back to Tom's River or wherever.
Exactly. Tom's River, New Jersey. Yes, that is where he's from. Like
Yeah.
he has had a great career. Like shout out, shout out to Todd Frazier, but like we don't need him on the 2021 version of the New York Mets. We have
Yeah.
plenty of depth finally. Like Guillorme should be playing, and he would have to unseat Davis anyway, and he shouldn't be in there over Davis regardless. And like, yeah, Dom's gonna have to play left, as we were going back to other point, but Todd Frazier should be nowhere near the Mets roster.
Yeah, unless they give him a coaching position, I don't want him anywhere near.
A coaching position,
Be a
fine.
player coach, that'd be cute.
Do not be on the field with a
I think
glove.
they did that with Kadire. I think Kadire ended up getting like coaching responsibilities when he was too hurt to play.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, which was great. I mean, Kadire's kind of was in the same boat as Frazier's now, like phenomenal veteran, like great presence in the locker room, but be nowhere near the baseball diamonds as a player.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to say it, but it's the truth. We don't need him. We got plenty of people. Finally, I'm looking very much forward to this 2021 New York Mets season. Kicks off Thursday, April 1st, 2 days from now on ESPN against the Nationals. I'm I wish it was on SNY. I
Is
need Gary
A-Rod
Keith
covering
around.
that game? Is A-Rod doing that game?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna have to look. I want to say yes though, which would be kind of ironic.
Oh God, if we get to interview Steve, oh
That would
my
be
goodness.
so funny.
I give credit to ESPN. I think they executed it very poorly, but at least they tried marketing players
They do. They
during
try,
spring training.
but it's
Just stop
horrible.
putting their face on the screen. Let them talk during the game with you. Like you don't need to take up 75% of the screen with Kyle Schwarber.
Exactly.
But
Like
at least they
the
tried.
very first nationally televised spring training game that the Mets had was on ESPN against the Nationals. And the very first inning, like the Mets were home, Peterson was literally throwing his first pitches, and they were interviewing Juan Soto, which like is fine. Like fine, I guess. Like I don't think it should be that early. I think that early you should focus on the baseball game that's right in front of you. But like, why is he taking up 3/4 of the screen? Like I
Yeah,
love
it
Juan
was
Soto.
really
I want to
dumb.
hear him talk, but like there's a time and place.
Yeah, they really failed on execution, but I gave them credit for trying. You had Soto, Smith, Lindor, and Schwarber all talk throughout the game.
Love me a
But
Dom
yeah,
Smith interview, but
right after the Barry Bonds discussion we had, so that was a lot of fun.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. But yeah, no, looking forward to it. Chris the Steely Man, thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah,
show.
thanks for having me.
Of course, very fun. And hey, let's go Mets. LFGM.
Let's
We're not
go,
going to say
man.
the whole thing, but
LFGM.
let's LFGM. We're 2 days away. I'm so excited. And thank you all for tuning in. As always, I appreciate y'all. Y'all know that the support does not go unnoticed. So thank you very much. And we will, oh, next week, forgot to mention Miguel Ducos. You guys know my relationship with Miguel Ducos. He's an artist. You might not know him, Chris, but that's my guy. So definitely looking forward to that conversation next week. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.